Welcome back. Our next session will set the course for Welcome back, everyone. Our next session will set the stage for Lobby Day tomorrow. Each of the asks will be presented, followed by an overview of Lobby Day and the state breakouts this evening. Elizabeth Beavers is our first presenter. She's a strategist and consultant for peace security advocacy, followed by Julie Noreen Bautista, a domestic policy analyst at Bread for the World in Washington, D.C. And Julie leads their engagement with Indigenous farmers and advocates for policies that consider broader food system challenges in the Farm Bill. And following Julie, we'll hear from Tersana Podell, EAD's Lobby Day coordinator. Now, Elizabeth will present People Over Pentagon, which is the Swords Ask, and Julie will recap the hunger and food insecurity focus, or Plowshares perspective. Tersana, our Lobby Day coordinator, will then provide an overview of what to expect for Lobby Day and the meetings and connection opportunities that we have planned. So I turn it over to Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Susan, and thank you to EAD, all the organizers, all the advocates, everyone who's here. I'm so excited to be with you all. This is awesome. Again, my name is Elizabeth. I am a consultant for peace and security advocacy, and one of my very, very favorite projects I get to work on is the People Over Pentagon campaign. And I'm so excited that one of the asks for EAD Lobby Days is this exact ask about cutting the Pentagon budget. And so I want to tell you a little more about that. And then I will just flag, I'm doing a workshop along with my colleague tomorrow. I believe it's at 11. And if you want more details on People Over Pentagon, we'd love to see you there. All right. So In the People Over Pentagon campaign, this is led by the organization Public Citizen. And in this campaign, I helped them organize to build support for big cuts to the Pentagon budget and increased funding for human needs priorities, which is exactly what you all are gathered to urge Congress to do as part of this event. So one of the major organizing vehicles for this campaign is HR 1134, the People Over Pentagon Act. So let me tell you a little bit more about this bill. It was introduced by Representatives Barbara Lee and Mark Pocan. It currently has a total of about 15 co-sponsors, but let me just tell you, we need way more. And that's where you all come in. So I should say the strategy here is not for this bill to pass in this Congress or even probably get a vote on its own, although some form of it could get a vote as an amendment as part of the broader National Defense Authorization Act. But that's a ways down the road. But for now, the strategy is this to be a vehicle to organize on and demonstrate that support for big cuts to the Pentagon budget are growing, and to just showcase how many members of Congress are willing to push back against the status quo and want to see a federal budget that actually reflects what we say are our most urgent priorities. So the text of this bill calls for $100 billion in cuts to the annual Pentagon budget, and for that money to be reinvested elsewhere. There's a few things I want to note about this bill in greater detail. It's about that simple, just calling for $100 billion in cuts. But one thing I will note is that it does carve out troop pay and health care for service members, and it protects those items from these cuts that it's calling for. So it's calling for $100 billion to be cut from the Pentagon, but not from troop pay or health care. It also does not say where that $100 billion should be reinvested. And this is intentional because it opens up messaging opportunities for advocates to talk about all the many ways that money could be better spent. I mean, we could talk this entire session about that alone. And I understand that we are going to be advocating on some alternatives where that money could be spent. But just think of the possibilities if just about any other agency in our government had $100 billion to spare. Like, what could we accomplish to make people's lives better? So it's a great messaging opportunity. And then the last thing I will flag for you about the bill is that last year, the Congressional Budget Office published a report explaining how $1 trillion could be cut from the Pentagon budget over a 10-year period without sacrificing security. That's a really helpful resource to point to for members of Congress to help justify $100 billion in cuts. Because, of course, I'm not great at math, but as I understand it, $1 trillion cuts over 10 years, that's about $100 billion each year. So unfortunately, there is currently no Senate version of the bill, but there are still ways we can ask senators to be helpful here, and we'll touch on that a bit more later. So if we could go back to the slide about the state of play. Thank you so much. So you all probably, I just want to fill you in on kind of what's going on politically around this issue. You probably saw earlier this year the issue of cutting Pentagon spending was in the news quite a bit, but not really in a good way. It came up because in the chaos around, in this new Congress where control of the House of Representatives flipped from Democrats to Republicans, and so they had to elect a new Speaker of the House. Kevin McCarthy eventually won, but it took like 17 tries or something like that to vote for him to get enough votes to become Speaker. And so apparently, in order to get all the votes, he made some sort of secret deal with a handful of members of Congress who kept voting against him to get them to flip and support him. So we still don't totally know what all he promised them, but a lot of reporting indicated that part of that deal was some sort of agreement to pursue budget cuts. And that was all it took for there to be like a major news cycle of a total bipartisan freak out at even the idea that specifically the military budget might be cut. Now, again, like there was no it's become apparent like that's not really on the table, and that wasn't even really what was discussed. But just even the idea of military budget cuts just like generated all these news pieces you probably saw about like, what, oh no, like what's going to happen, sky's falling. So the truth is, though, as more reporting has indicated, is that efforts to cut the federal budget this year are probably going to, as usual, exempt the Pentagon, which means, as usual, we're facing the possibility of deep cuts to human needs priorities, even as the Pentagon budget is almost at $1 trillion, almost. For the last couple of years, the Biden administration has requested big increases to the Pentagon budget, and Congress has not only gladly fulfilled that, but has said, sure, have a few more billion, why not? They've added like 25, 30, 35, 40 billion dollars, even on top of what President Biden has requested. So this year, we're right now at the start of the budget process, and President Biden has requested $886 billion for the defense budget. As we know, there's not a whole lot of defense actually happening, but this includes the Department of Defense, nuclear weapons and associated costs in the Department of Energy, and some other associated like security related money throughout other agencies. So again, Congress is probably going to add 20 or 30 billion or more on top of this. So that means we are not far from a $1 trillion Pentagon budget. It's really not a question of if, but when. So turning now specifically to the asks. So in the House, it's a great time to be pressuring Congress on this. You all are doing this at the exact right time. What we need is to show that there are members who are not okay with a $1 trillion Pentagon budget. They are not okay with constantly sacrificing domestic human needs priorities, even as the Pentagon budget gets higher and higher and higher. So if you are meeting with your House representative and they have not yet co-sponsored the bill, ask them to co-sponsor the People Over Pentagon Act, HR 1134. If they have, let's tell them a big thank you. Make sure they know you have their back. You totally support them on this. Turning to the Senate, so again, we don't have a Senate version. If your senator is particularly good on this and they might consider introducing that, that's a great thing to talk about. But honestly, the very best thing any senator can do right now is state publicly, whether it's a tweet, in a speech, a press release, op-ed, like anything, that they do not want to see the Pentagon get to a $1 trillion budget, and they want to see meaningful cuts with increased investments in human needs. So that is a run through of the asks on the Pentagon budget side. Again, I am running a workshop tomorrow where I'd love to chat with more of you, and then I'll look forward to hearing your questions as well. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I am so excited personally to speak up against this $1 trillion budget and the need not only for investing in human needs, but diplomacy rather than weapons. There's so much more we share in common with our brothers and sisters around the world for the care and keeping of each other. And now we can turn our attention to Julie from Bread for the World to talk to us about the domestic ask.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Julie, and I'm the domestic policy analyst for the government relations team at Bread for the World. And this presentation is actually very, very, perfect in timing because this morning, it's been a very busy week, not only because of EAD, but there was also a rally that occurred this morning demanding for a clean debt ceiling, prioritizing healthcare and food and housing, meaning no cuts. And so, as a counter to the bill that we're trying to advocate for, there is a McCarthy bill that is really harmful currently on the table, which is called the Default on America. And unfortunately, it is a very harmful bill that cuts critical programs. Estimated that 26 million students will receive reduced funding for programs. And as as someone who went through the Upward Bound program, which is a college prep program when I was in high school, that is a very important kind of pipeline from, low income students getting into college. And so that's really important, and that will be cut. And then the other thing would be kind of, under this proposal, another 7.5 million children with disabilities with also face reduced support, from getting 48,000 teachers and related services cut from their services as well. And so there are a lot at stake in this, and I can list it all day, but I've just been very proud of the group that organized this. I chair the Domestic Human Needs Coalition, which is a subcommittee under the Greater Washington Interreligious Staffing Community, which I'm sure many of you are a part of or have heard of. And so this is, like I said, such an important timing. And thank you so much to Elizabeth, who kind of walked us down kind of a summary of what this bill does. And so through our asks, so Bread for the World actually has very, very similar priorities in our farm bill. So I'll go through a couple of them. First, protecting and strengthening, SNAP, meaning no additional work requirements, not extending age requirements. And a lot of people have misinterpreted, or kind of there is a misconception that there are no work requirements currently. That is not true. There are current work requirements. Actually, you cannot be unemployed for more than 3 months if you're on SNAP. And so that is something a lot of our other members, whenever we talk to the Hill about this issue, that they bring up. The other thing is removing barriers to SNAP benefits, including repealing the federal drug felony ban. This is also a great timing to be advocating for this. There is a marker bill currently with this that we're hoping to get introduced by the end of this month by Senator Booker. And we've had conversations at the Hill with Senator Collins, who's with the Republican Party from Maine. And so this is an important kind of conversation that we're having, because first of all, with the Drug Policy Alliance leading this conversation, I think everyone needs to be aware of recidivism and how the lack of access to nutritious food or benefits really just drives people back into reincarceration, which causes people tax dollars or federal tax money in terms of reincarcerating them. And so it is not healthy for society. It's not healthy for the individual if we're not in support of this, repealing the drug felony ban. The other thing that I wanted to, that's also which is also part of the broader SNAP ask, is kind of allowing the dual use of SNAP and the food distribution program on Indian reservation. Allowing that dual use. So currently, the only food assistance program that is banned from being used at the same time are those two. And so, when we talk about parity, that's it just doesn't make sense that our Native siblings and Native brothers and sisters are not able to access the same kind of benefits, especially being in a remote area where there are no grocery stores. So the food distribution program actually brings them food boxes into their doors instead of using SNAP, being able to use those in grocery stores. But being able to use both of them and having access to both it just gives them parity. And so really excited that everyone is advocating for this. And finally, addressing food insecurity for vulnerable populations, like I mentioned, Native populations, veterans, LGBTQ adults, and really just emphasizing that food is a basic human right, and ensuring that those who are hungry are fed, and this is a moral obligation by our faith. And so how can we really move forward? When we talk about this, obviously you're having the advocacy day tomorrow or this week. And so I really encourage, I think one thing is really encouraging bipartisanship within our members. I think that's one message that is really important. We recently, yesterday, we had a bipartisan event with Senator Bozeman and Senator Stabenow, Senator Brown, and Senator Braun. All four of them showed up at this reception, and it was just amazing how we are able to bring both sides of the aisle to the table and talk about the Farm Bill, talk about the really critical programs that help our communities and the people that we care about. And so, kind of emphasizing that our faith encourages us to love our neighbors and coming into these meetings, being grounded in our faith and values. And I encourage you to use your prophetic voice and being bold and talking about these programs and envisioning a world really without hunger. And so I wanted to thank everyone in this conference and just wanted to emphasize that how grateful and honored I am to be here. And thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Elizabeth. I want to encourage everyone in the audience to put questions into the Q&A that you might have for either one of these asks, and then you can share your answers in your state breakout rooms afterwards. I have one question to begin with for Elizabeth about the People Over the Pentagon Act. Cutting the Pentagon by such a large number makes people concerned about jobs, that the effect it will have for people in their state who get their income from that budget line. So seeing that this is a threat to jobs, how do you respond to that concern?
Yeah, for sure. So, there's no question that a real transition away from dependence on military spending is going to require a certain amount of a transition in our economy. But, let's not forget the military is the number one jobs program in our country by design. It is intended to be that way. Particularly military contractors have sort of entrenched their interest within so many states and so many localities to make sure people feel really worried about jobs. So I would encourage folks, another organization that I work with, the Cost of War Project with Brown University, just did a major report on exactly this question. And what they found is pretty astounding. So one thing is that it turns out that this is actually possibly the very worst way for our government to create jobs. Dollar for dollar, federal spending on the military creates fewer jobs than an equal amount of spending would in other sectors like education or healthcare, et cetera. So that, again, is an active choice that our government is making. They could create more jobs by investing in other sectors, and they should. The other thing is that a really amazing study that they published by Miriam Pemberton shows that it is absolutely possible for our economy to transition and convert away from such dependence on military manufacturing and weapons manufacturing. In fact, that a lot of workers support that and would like to see it happen. That same industrial base can create civilian, peaceful, green technology that we're not investing in. And again, it is by choice. Our government has decided that is how they're going to spend the money. So look, no question, the economy would need to change a little, but I would also just flag for folks that right now about half the Pentagon budget goes directly into the pockets of big contractors. It's not really going to workers. It's not really going to service members. There's so much waste and abuse that there's a lot of stuff ripe for cutting before we even get to the question of our economy transitioning.
Okay, and there's a follow-up question that fits right into what you just said. So what are some examples of programs that should be cut from the Pentagon spending?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me, after I answer this, I'll drop in the chat a really wonderful op-ed that was just published by the president of Public Citizen, Rob Weissman, along with the president of a conservative organization, the National Taxpayers Union, talking about exactly that bipartisan agreement around some programs that can and should be cut. One is the really wasteful F-35 program. This is a plane that literally doesn't work, is not on the path to work anytime soon. I think we've spent we were getting close to like $1 trillion total already trying to make it work. Again, it's mostly just kind of contractor greed and profiteering. It just truly doesn't work, and we should abandon it and let it go. So that's one. Another one is that the Pentagon itself has never passed an audit and has itself identified billions of dollars in waste that is just totally can't be accounted for or is being like spent on duplicate costs. So by the Pentagon's own measures, we have billions of dollars we could cut. We could ask for the Pentagon to stop relying so much on contracting. Even cutting it by 15% could save billions. There's the littoral combat ship that's really wasteful that many have flagged as an opportunity for cuts. I would also point everyone to our People Over Pentagon website, peopleoverpentagon.org. We did a full list of how you could get to $200 billion in cuts back in 2019. It definitely needs to be updated a little, but a lot of it still holds up.
Wow. That's amazing how much could be cut that we haven't even started at. Wow, you've inspired me that it's not asking too much to do this, right? Now, Julie, we have some questions about the domestic asks and that I think you'll be able to answer. So can you explain other places where dual use of SNAP and food distribution programs are used so we can understand the difference? Is it not allowed for Native people, but it's allowed for other people? Is it geographical? That's the question.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify that the food distribution program on Indian reservation. So FDIPR is a whole program specifically for the reservations and for Native people. And so currently it is not allowed to be part of SNAP and FDIPR at the same time. And it is those are the only combination of food programs that are banned together. So if you think about if you have WIC and SNAP, you can use both benefits at the same time. But, unfortunately, you can't use FDIPR and SNAP at the same time. And so that just, goes into parity. And this was really significant during the pandemic because when SNAP benefits increased and people who were on FDIPR did not receive the same benefit, and they were stuck on getting the food boxes even though they probably had more need during the pandemic. So just being able to access both and being allowed to have access to both programs are really critical and important, especially like I mentioned in remote places, where there are no grocery stores. But yeah, just a fun fact, maybe this would be helpful in the Navajo Nation, where it encompasses about 3 states, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico, that there are only about eight grocery stores. And so it's really unfortunate. And so that, that land mass, when you think about it, is just unbelievable. But yes, I hope that answers your.
Yes. And there's another question I think you can answer. Are you familiar with the Closing the Meal Gap Act? How is that related to the ask? Is there a reason we're targeting members associated with it? And do we have a message to share with them?
Yeah, so the Closing the Meal Gap Act is really just strengthening SNAP and having additional benefits. And so I believe it was introduced by Senator Gillibrand. And so this is just really exciting because I think a lot of the narrative currently is just cutting, especially for the House Republicans, just cutting and trying to find ways to cut critical programs. And I think just having this other bill that counters that rhetoric and narrative just simply shows that people are willing to go against the status quo. Like Elizabeth said, this is a vehicle. Like what we're proposing for is a vehicle to show that people are willing to go against the status quo and fight for the people that are on the periphery and are not, that cannot, advocate for themselves in this space. But
yeah, really exciting to find out about these bills and to empower us to speak up for them. It's fantastic. At this moment, I'd like to turn it over to Tersana to provide the Lobby Day overview.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you both to Elizabeth and Julie for your excellent and informative presentation on both of the asks. So my name is Tersana Padel, and this is my second year as Lobby Day Coordinator for EAD. Similar to last year, I would like to start by thanking our conference organizers, speakers, moderators, and sponsors for putting together programs that continue to educate and inspire us on both domestic and global concerns that will later be reflected in our conversation with congressional offices. I would also like to thank you, the participants, for your continued and unwavering loyalty to EAD. In times where I'm sure everyone can agree, where both democracy and hope kind of seem like they're playing peekaboo a little bit, there's something very energizing about reclaiming agency through a gathering of communities that prioritize advocacy. We cannot build and empower ideas and dreams without first dedicating ourselves to a process that demands the acknowledgement and assembly of the many tiny pieces that gradually come together to provide sustainable and equitable support to all. So, what is Lobby Day and why is it important? Lobby Day is a term used by organizations like EAD that designate select days when regular people like you and me meet with our elected officials to advocate for legislation regarding issues we find important. EAD is special in many, many ways, and one of the main highlights of this conference is that the opportunity to engage with congressional offices is interwoven into the framework of this event. We are here to empower you, the constituents, as you join us in supporting legislation that brings us closer to a society built on the values of equity, equality, justice, peace, human rights, and dignity for all. I cannot begin to describe what it means to us, the organizers, to have you all here willing to lend your voices in support of legislation that aligns with our theme. So our official Lobby Day meetings will happen tomorrow, April 27th, from 2 p.m. to 4:45 p.m. Eastern Time. Meetings are scheduled by state and are generally 30 minutes long, so it's important that they run as efficiently as possible. All meetings are virtual. You don't have to worry about booking an overnight trip to DC to meet with the senators. Everything will be virtual. You will be given the opportunity to discuss the asks further, assign roles, and familiarize yourself with others from your state in your separate breakout sessions. And although we tried our hardest, we were unable to get lobby meetings for all the states represented at EAD this year, but that's not to say that we don't have opportunities for you. So I would like to say that we have confirmed meetings for Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Florida, Kentucky, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Maryland, Maine, Michigan, North Carolina, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Vermont, and Washington. The meetings will be held on the Excel Events platform unless otherwise indicated. If you did not hear your state called, I am sorry to report that we were not able to secure a meeting with your state. However, that doesn't mean that you don't have a lobbying opportunity. You are more than welcome to join the meetings for California, Vermont, Massachusetts, Arkansas, New Jersey, and New York, because all those elected officials that we were able to secure meetings with and their offices, they're involved with the two asks that Elizabeth and Julie spoke on. So go ahead and join the breakout session. It will be happening the same time as the state breakout sessions, and it's called Lobby Day Parlor for more information about those additional Lobby Day opportunities. So attending your breakout session is mandatory if you're planning on joining a meeting. They will start at 4:45 p.m. immediately after this plenary. Before I turn this program back to Susan, I also would like to personally thank Susie Tierney for helping me set up a lot of these meetings. It wouldn't have been made possible without her. So thank you so much, Susie, if you're out there. And to all of the wonderful organizers who have volunteered to monitor these meetings and the sessions. Susie, back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm sure there's an army of people to thank, and I have a few here on my list as well. A special thanks to Thaddeus Elliott and Katie Adams at the United Church of Christ DC office, as well as my own Dan Moriarty at the Maryknoll Office for Global Concerns. Just carried a great load on the international ask. And everyone who helped, not only with the ask, but the related documents. I see there's mention in the chat about where you can go to find the papers that will help you understand these asks and the bills that are involved with them. And they'll come up again in your breakout groups at 4:45. So you can go to advocacydays.org website and you can download the attachments. And here in this system, you can go to the Lobby Day Info Desk tab in the Sullivan's lobby. So at this point, I want to say that John and I will see you tomorrow at 12 noon when we welcome Reverend Dr. Alvin O'Neill Jackson, the senior strategist with the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, for our Hill send-off. And I'm sure we'll be sent off with great spirit. There's still more great workshops planned for tomorrow morning, followed by devotional time entitled Our Daily Bread with Dr. Jesse Smith. And the expo will also be open so you can rack in more vital points and make great connections until we head out virtually for our lobby day. Tonight from 7:30 to 9 p.m., you won't want to miss a great presentation from Swords to Plowshares Northeast, one of our offering recipients, which includes a demonstration for converting guns into garden tools and equips you to organize gun buybacks and events in your local community and congregations so you can help get guns off the streets in your community and to teach gun safety. Swords to Plowshares Northeast is also a recipient of the offering for this year's EAD gathering. So at this point, we have a few minutes where you can catch your breath, get a glass of water, and prepare for your 4:45 state and regional breakouts that Charmaine will tell us about. I don't know. There she is.
Hi. Real quickly, I'm going to just actually shift it back to Tersana. And Tersana, if you could just make sure that your camera is on so we can all see you. And you could just very quickly tell them how they're going to move now to their state breakouts.
All right. Is everyone able to see me? Because on my end, I can see myself. Okay. Thank you. Sorry about the technical issues. So after this session, after we leave the plenary, there are state breakout sessions set up for you for 4:45. Each session will have a monitor, so we all have people assigned waiting for you. Just go ahead, scroll through the list, find the state that you are from. And like I said, we don't have all meetings for all the states that are represented here, but we have meetings for 20 of them. And for those of you who don't have a state that you see represented, just come and join me in the Lobby Day parlor. And then we will talk about the Lobby Day opportunities that are available to you. Just because your state isn't represented doesn't mean you don't have the opportunity to touch base with congressional offices who are a part of, who all have a hand in the asks that were presented.
Sounds great. So we'll all meet up in the Lobby Day parlor and go off to our state breakout rooms.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.